Content Championship time.
Yes.
Amazing Spider-Man versus the Phantom Menace. The two titans of being hated and then slowly loved. As always, we will discuss these films based on 6 points. Personal relevance, how well has it aged, rewatchability, story, acting, and cinematography / general visual appeal.
Yes.
Would you like to get us started?
Sure. So personal relevance. This is actually kind of tough because obviously both hold pretty nostalgic points. Like, yes, I remember the Raimi Spider-Man films. But I was very young when they were coming out. Amazing Spider-Man was essentially my generation Spider-Man. Like, it's the one that...
It was 10 years ago now. 11.
Yeah. It's the one that we went to cinema and we grew up with and we saw, and it holds that point. Like, that's the Spider-Man that I often think about, sometimes first when I think back. So it holds a pretty relevant place. But then you got Phantom Menace. I'm a big Star Wars fan. But I will say that I remember the original trilogy before I think about the prequels. Because obviously they're like the ones I saw very young or saw bits of. But then prequels, I mean, how can you not remember the pod racing?
That moment where the second blade comes out.
Like, that's the thing. It's like the prequels were the ones of our generation, and we kind of grew up in a place where the Star Wars fans hated them, but we were like, well, they're not that bad.
Well, just to put in perspective how important the Phantom Menace was, I did not grow up in a rich family. We are much better off now than we were when I was growing up, and I'm so thankful for that. But we were working to maybe slightly top end of working class.
Yep.
And the one expensive toy I had was my lightsaber, which was Darth Maul's lightsaber. And obviously everyone had their own little lightsaber back in the days, even if it was a cheap knockoff one. It was actually one of the few things that kids didn't bully each other for, as long as you had a lightsaber, come play Star Wars. And I remember the day I got it, I had my double-ended Darth Maul lightsaber, and all my friends only had their single. They had their Darth Vader one, or their Obi-Wan one, or their Anakin one. And I'm there with two, and I'm like, right, let's fucking have you, because I've got both ends, and I'm giving it some. And they are some of my fondest memories of playing as a child. So I'm like, I am the badass because I have the cool double-ended lightsaber. Which is why, although I'm not personally a fan of Kylo Ren's lightsaber, when I saw it, that child part of my brain still went, oh, it has vents. And we all knew it was just for selling toys.
Oh yeah,
at the same time, we're like, I would have wanted that toy.
Everyone's like, that looks really fucking cool. Makes no sense, but it looks really fucking cool.
Yeah. And you're right. The prequels are films.
Yeah, and it's why we've fallen in love. Our generation love Anakin so much, and I mean, we got given a lot of extra stuff to build on that. But
100%. But when I fully started to form my identity and what I liked was around the time I realized that I'd just been told the prequels were bad.
Yes,
I didn't actually hate them. I do dislike Attack of the Clones. I think that's a poor film. I love it for its nostalgia, but I think overall it's a poor film. But Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith are actively good films.
Yeah.
I was just told for 15 years by adults who grew up watching the original trilogy that they were shit.
Yeah. And I always remember...
I always laugh when our generation shits on the sequels. It's like, yeah, but it wasn't for you.
That's funny because it's like, I was similar. Like, I always remember watching them and thinking, I don't think they're that bad. Like, I don't get why people are hating on them. And then people are like, you have to watch, if you're going to binge it, you have to watch the original trilogy, then the prequels, because the original trilogy is better and it makes you appreciate them more. And I'm like, Yeah, but I just want to watch in order. Like, am I wrong for that? And I enjoy the prequels. Like, it's Star Wars. Like, lightsabers. Need I say more? So, I think, although Amazing Spider-Man was our generation Spider-Man, it's Star Wars. It's just Star Wars.
It's really rough. Yeah, I would say for what I've written down was for the Amazing Spider-Man. It is the most underrated Spider-Man film,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also starting to float around being overrated because the internet is looking at it with slightly too many rose-tinted glasses. It's not as
Yeah.
bad as people acted at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but it is not as good as people are acting now. As
Yeah,
as with
people are
everything, it is
correcting to
somewhere
it.
in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then with Star Wars, you had fans who loved Star Wars from the 80s, hated it. And they
Mm-hmm.
made the actor who played young Anakin in episode 1 quit acting forever.
Yeah.
And I know moving on from episode 1, Hayden Christensen didn't really do much acting work and was given abuse for years.
Mm-hmm.
And only in literally the last like 2 or 3 years has he finally seen the group of fans who actually love and adore him.
Yeah, he's had 20,
Um,
20 years of waiting for that.
yeah, but I love both these films so much. This is going to suck no matter what decision we come to.
Yes.
Right. I'm going to read out
Okay.
what I have written for one of the films and how well it has aged.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me what film I've written it about.
Oh, okay. Let's see if I can
Yeah.
figure this out. Yeah.
Well, it's more loved now than it was at release by far. And it would be a cult classic if not for the size of the franchise it comes from.
That's. I'm gonna say Star Wars because you
Both of
mentioned.
them.
Oh, it was a trick question. I'm sat here thinking like
Yeah.
Star Wars is Star Wars is big, but I mean Spider-Man and Marvel is also fucking huge. So it's like.
I was sat here, I was trying to work out what was right. I was like, I have the exact same opinion versus how well it's aged for both of them. They were both massively overhated at release, and
Yeah.
every day people love it and love it more.
Mhm.
And they genuinely are them kinds of films that would be viewed as cult classic than films that didn't do well, but people love. And the only reason I don't view it as a cult classic is because I think the franchises are too big for them to be considered cult classics.
Yeah.
I genuinely don't know if I can say one of these has aged better than the other.
I would maybe argue Star Wars, like Phantom Menace, has, but then I feel like I'm taking into the bias of all the extra content we've had from animated Clone Wars that built those characters up more, that made us fall in love with those characters more, that has helped obviously the film's age better for us.
Yeah, 100%. It's really tricky.
I would maybe say Phantom Menace also, like, we grew up and we, like, a lot of us didn't hate them and we were told to hate them. But I feel as it's aged, yes, they've aged better for us, but it has also, some of those people that were like, oh, these were rubbish films, have realized, oh, actually, they're good Star Wars. Like,
It was really funny when the sequels were coming out, watching a bunch of people who I know for a fact used to hate the prequels, going, the prequels weren't great, but at least X, Y, and Z.
yeah, they're realizing, oh wait, maybe we were wrong about the prequels. And I can't wait for us all to be saying the same about the sequels once Dave's fixed it.
I have my issues with the sequels, but overall, I have always believed they are actually okay films. There's just the biggest problem the sequels had has always been
the story,
a lack of overall direction.
Yeah,
because they kept chopping and changing shit.
So yeah, I would maybe lean towards Phantom Menace as age slightly.
I would agree overall, but just as a counterpoint, because what's the point if we don't argue for no reason? Could you argue Spider-Man has aged better because it's done the same amount of growth in less time?
I guess, yes.
But I do think I agree that Star Wars has aged better. Rewatchability.
Who? I don't know. I feel like they're very similar.
So I do have a winner here from a very logical and boring point of view.
Okay.
The Amazing Spider-Man you can simply watch by itself.
See, this is where my brain was going.
However,
Okay.
and we've used this as a metric before.
True.
If you watch the Phantom Menace, as much as I hate it, I'm throwing on Attack of the Clones.
Yeah. And then you're making the decision, do I watch animated stuff?
Are we rewatching the Clone Wars, or are we just going straight into Revenge of the Sith?
Yeah. I was like, my brain's like, they're both the start points of their respective situations. And it's like, you could throw either of them on. You don't need to watch anything before them. Spider-Man is a bit shorter. Like more, like you say, you could watch that on its own, not worry about the second one. Probably be fine. Throw on Phantom Menace and you're like, well, I'm going to have to watch at least the prequels.
Yeah.
And then by that point, well, I might as well watch the original trilogy.
Put it this way, having grown up in the time we did, the 14-year-old boy inside our head would lose our ever-loving shit if we don't rewatch Attack of the Clones to see Natalie Portman in that outfit.
Okay, point made.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, come on now. There's going to be a 14-year-old boy punching you in the brain, just going, "Fuck, do you think you're doing?"
Yep. Okay. Spider-Man wins that one.
Story.
I'd actually maybe lean. The prequel story is good. It is the start of the story and the setup. And without the full trilogy, I think you need to watch the whole story across the trilogy. I think you could actually just get away with the story in the Amazing Spider-Man, and like, it's an origin. It is what it is, though. Like, this is.
So, I'm gonna need you to cast your brain back to you when you were watching The Amazing Spider-Man for the first time, as I make my points for the story here. It is a solid story, and it was cool to see Gwen as an actual main character, because at the time that hadn't happened in popular media. And it was really cool to see the Lizard as the main villain, because the only time that had really happened before was in comics.
Yep.
And in the 90s animated show. And they also set up good threads for a long Spider-Man saga if they'd pulled their finger out and done it properly. They actually did a lot of stuff for the first time. The biggest complaint people had at the time was Andrew Garfield is too cool to be Peter Parker. What a dumb fucking complaint.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, hot take, I think this story had the best version of Flash Thompson. In the Raimi trilogy, we just get the bully.
Yeah.
And in the MCU trilogy, we get the modern bully.
Yeah.
Who's like less physically a bully and more social media bully, which makes sense. But this trilogy gave us the physical jock that I think Flash Thompson should be.
Yeah.
But you also had the scene after Uncle Ben died where Flash comes to talk to him and he goes, "Not today, Flash." And he grabs him and throws him up against the locker. And Flash just goes, "I heard about your uncle. You okay?"
Yeah.
And that is a very Flash Thompson style I like. I don't like characters being two-dimensional for the sake of it, and just to have that pop of, "Oh, it's Flash," when he's not going to be a plot point. So for them to go, "No, Flash was more than that." We know bullies are assholes, but they're always assholes because they have their own problem going on. And in all really good Spider-Man media, they always actually examine Flash in that way of, why is Flash being a dick?
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that. And I don't think any other Spider-Man story in live action has nailed that.
Yeah, that's fair.
But again, like I said with Star Wars, without the story in the Phantom Menace, we have nothing. Yes, I know the original trilogy was written before the prequels, and it existed without it. But that is the beginning of the story.
Yeah.
It adds context. It gives us everything. Yes, Darth Vader is obviously an absolute badass, but if we didn't have the prequels, you wouldn't feel kind of a weird sadness when you see Darth Vader. Yeah, your first thing is like, oh, he's such a badass, but you're just like, oh, Anakin, why?
Yeah.
And
How you feel.
the prequel memes, although a lot of them come from a genuinely memey place, there are some where you do find yourself quite sad. And it's like when you're watching Revenge of the Sith and Anakin still falls to the dark side, and it's just someone crying. It's like it added a lot of emotion to Star Wars in a really, really smart way, despite the dialogue sometimes being shit.
That's what it is.
Well, do you know what? And I know this is the wrong film, but we're going to talk about it.
Okay.
When Anakin is talking about sand.
Yeah.
It's beautiful because it just shows that George Lucas at times had the perfect idea but just couldn't execute.
Yeah.
And the whole point is he has the really dull line of, I don't like sand, it's coarse and it hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah. That he isn't talking about sand. He's talking about the difference between Padme growing up as a princess and him growing up as a slave. To her, the beach was a relaxing thing to go and bathe in the sun. To him, the sand was where he was a slave and where he worked in horrible conditions. And people just ignore this.
They just think it's like everyone's meme stance.
Yeah, this is the problem. I just don't think people had enough. It's not reading comprehension. It's something comprehension, though.
Well, yeah, it's people kind of went into that film with a certain perception.
But I would agree that the absolute standalone story, which is how we always try and do these, that the Spider-Man story is tighter and more well put together.
Yeah. I agree.
Acting. I think this might be the strongest category for both films.
Yeah. They've both got good casts.
We get Ewan McGregor, Liam Neeson, like
Samuel L. Jackson in the first.
Samuel L. Jackson, Mace Windu's in the first one.
So, like, straight away, stacked.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, we have Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone very early in their careers.
Yeah.
And I always forget this. Do you remember who played Uncle Ben in The Amazing Spider-Man?
I can, like, picture him, but I can't think of his name.
It was Martin fucking Sheen.
That's it, yeah.
Like, he is a superstar at the time. That is, like, such stacked casts. They all pull their role to perfection. I genuinely think the only difference in what could be viewed as the quality of acting is the quality of the script.
Yep. Where Star Wars is
a little bit weaker because it is. It was written 10 years earlier when these kind of films really didn't need to have a stronger script.
Yeah.
But I mean, everyone acted their arse off. Liam Neeson's Qui-Gon Jinn might be one of my favorite castings of all time.
Yeah, and then you've also got like something in Star Wars is like part of the acting is the lightsabers and like the way they fought with them and like all the fight scenes, like
and Ewan McGregor constantly getting in trouble for making the lightsaber noises with his mouth, which we would all do.
Oh yeah, well Hayden Christian did it as well.
Apparently, them two were a nightmare to work with during.
I imagine they just pissed about
constantly.
But yeah, both had great casts. One had slightly stronger script, but I feel like those performances in Star Wars though were so such strong characters.
I think the performances in Star Wars elevate a weak script to the point where this is even a discussion. I think if they acted to the quality of the script, Phantom Menace would actually be as bad as some people want to pretend it is.
Yeah, I could agree on that then. Yeah.
That would be my opinion on it.
Yeah, no, I do think the people in those prequels helped heighten it to what it is.
Yeah. Cinematography.
Um,
I have one major point for each of these.
okay, let's hear them.
Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
The Amazing Spider-Man is the best live-action web swinging we've ever had.
Exactly where my brain went.
Nothing else in live action has got close to what the Amazing Spider-Man films put together.
Mm-hmm.
I always think of that the final battle of the Amazing Spider-Man when he's hurt on the roof and he has to get back to the Osborn Tower or the Oscorp Tower, and you see the cranes coming together to give him like a slightly easier route, and you see him swinging there. The way New York is, and I hate it's like the most cliche thing to say, but the way New York is a character in the story. But like they made the web swinging feel very natural, which is such an important part of Spider-Man's visual appeal. And don't get me wrong, it's always done well, but they really went.
They nailed it.
If we only get one thing right, let's make sure it's the web swinging.
Yeah.
And I would give anything to go back to it because it was just so damn good. And for Phantom Menace, I simply put, Duel of the Fates is cinema heritage.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how else to put it.
That the
scene
two places
made me feel some kind of way.
Like, when we said cinematography, in my brain's like, well, Spider-Man had really good web swinging. And that's like the thing that like sticks out, like, of what they did so well with how it was shot. And then I'm like, but then Duel of the Fates. Just the way that scene's put together from start to finish. Oh. I actually think like I can't even. Like there's no question to me when I think about it that way. Like as soon as I think about that one sequence, it's Phantom Menace.
It's rough. The problem is with cinematography, we also take into account the general visuals of it.
Yeah.
And they had a CGI lizard for a lot of that film, and they did it flawlessly.
True. They did. But then Phantom Menace was before they went too crazy with CGI, so still
no. I'm not saying this is an easy discussion at all.
I know.
But like the Amazing Spider-Man, despite its flaws and the sequel's flaws, they are both gorgeous films.
Mm-hmm.
And Phantom Menace is such a nice film to look at. Like it's one of them films that you don't strain your eyes to watch. Your eyes genuinely feel relaxed just taking it all in. And I'd say it's very impressive, bearing in mind they spend a fair bit of the film on Tatooine, where it's all just dusty and beige.
Yeah.
To make that visually appealing is fucking impressive.
This is true.
And pod racing.
Also pod racing. One of the best N64 games.
I suggest we call cinematography a draw.
Okay.
And then hope the other 5 settle the decision for us so we don't have to decide which is the better looking film.
Okay. Well, personal
relevance is purely your personal opinion. I assume you're taking Phantom Menace?
This is correct.
I would be taking Spider-Man, naturally. That's kind of how the whole podcast works. You're the Star Wars dude, I'm the comic dude. Would be in big trouble if it was the other way around. How well it is aged, we agreed with Star Wars.
Yeah.
Despite my very good Spider-Man point.
Yeah.
Rewatchability, we gave
Spider-Man
to Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Story, we gave to Spider-Man.
Acting,
we gave to Star Wars.
So we're drawn. Through and through.
For fuck's sake.
We are perfectly drawn.
I guess we're deciding what film looks better. You're asked to watch one of these films purely as a graphic designer to look purely at the visuals. You don't give a fuck about the acting, the story, anything. You're just taking one for the visuals. You're taking Star Wars.
Star Wars.
There we go. You're the designer. I would disagree, but you're the designer. We're going to trust your artistic integrity here. If you get smoked, you lose all your credibility.
I don't care. The VFX are great in Spider-Man, but like the shots that we get in Star Wars just have a different feel.
This is where we have the real issue of cinematography and being general visuals as well, being so wide, because cinematography in reality is its own thing.
Yeah.
But when we talk about TV shows, cinematography just isn't fair when you're looking at something like Green Arrow versus a Disney Plus show.
Yeah.
But that puts Phantom Menace through. And do you know what else that is?